Damnedest Farseek, Bonfire of the Damnedest Foros, and 3 copies of Advent of the Worm. So much bigger deck, as you see the record here on the screen of 10 and 2.
A much more actually kind of a Jund-ish take on Naya.
Yes.
Much more about accelerating into big threats than necessarily playing the fastest, most efficient attackers. Chase on your left is playing blue, white, red Flash. His list is very similar, actually possibly identical to the one that Matt Costa currently sits undefeated with.
This actually looks identical to the list that Costa.
Yeah, it's actually this is the same list. So Chase off to has all of his mana with Steam Vents into Glacial Fortress. Mark Eilers on the draw, attempting to resolve a Farseek off of his Rootbound Crag and Sacred Foundry. We'll see if this induces perhaps a Syncopate.
So what this match is going to be here is this is a match of haymakers from Eilers' side. You know, again, he has cards like Boros Reckoner, Huntmaster of the Fells, Gorkland Rampager, Thundermaw, Hellkite, Advent of the Worm. So it's just going to be haymaker after haymaker from Eilers' side, and Kovacs' ability to both manage those haymakers and be able to turn the corner and win the game himself.
Yeah, as long as Mark can prevent himself from getting too far on the back foot, his 5s and 6s should be able to dominate the game. But of course, that's always the struggle against blue, white, red Flash, is trying to actually get out in front of the counter spells, out in front of the threats, out in front of the removal spells. And if Eilers is able to do that, then he has a very good chance of winning. As long as he can keep Chase's board empty, keep his life total high, he should have enough time to deploy some very powerful threats.
Now, Eilers here just cast a Boros Reckoner. That got syncopated as well, so it's 2 syncopates down. And again, Eilers is just going to unleash another haymaker here in the form of Gorkland Rampager. You saw Kovac miss his land drop. He drew a counterflux for the turn, and he's also staring at a War Leader's Helix. Chooses not to counterflux that with the answer in War Leader's Helix in his hand, but does not have a 4th land quite yet. So now Eilers is going to be able to at least get in 4 points of damage. You see him play a Sunpetal Grove, and it looks like we might be going for a little dragon action here now, too, and Thundermaw Hellkite.
And that should be good enough to warrant a counterflux.
I would agree with you. This is a good counterflux target. As Gorkland Rampager will come to the red zone, put Kovac down to 16. But remember, he does have that War Leader's Helix just looking for a 4th land. Drawing Sphinx's Revelation is not a way to take care of that.
He does appear to have 2 copies of Pillar of Flame in his hand, if I'm seeing that correctly. So that's an avenue to take care of that Rampager if he so chooses.
The question, of course, is to use 1 card or to use 2?
Yes.
You know, if he does draw a land, ideally for Mr. Kovac, it would be an untapped land like a Glacial Fortress. But he's going to opt to double Pillar of Flame this, which means that he's probably going to be a little bit softer to a card like Voice of Resurgence moving forward.
Yes. Although again, he has Snapcaster also back, so he has a potential hedge against Voice of Resurgence.
Now this is the fear of your Eilers, because now your large threats have either been countered or answered. The only follow-ups he has is 2 copies of Absence Program and pass the turn back. They do not provide a good clock. They do give him a little bit of addition of mana, and with Kovac kind of stumbling around a little bit, maybe they can get some points of damage through. But it looks like Kovac has drawn his 4th land in the form of Sacred Foundry, and he's deciding right now if he wants to play it tapped or untapped.
Gonna play the land untapped. Pass the turn.
This is, of course, representing many different things from a blue-white red Flash deck, representing War Leader's Helix, Snapcaster Mage, Restoration Angel. So many different things he can do right now. But we see Eilers come across with those 2 Pilgrims. Kovac just takes the damage. Again, using your life total as a resource is definitely something that's key to success with blue-white red Flash. As you mentioned earlier, if you're not at 0, then you're not dead. And this deck has plenty of ways to gain life as well.
Yeah. A lot of it's going to be predicated on how much range you think your opponent has. Chase probably under the assumption that Mark's deck not really that burn-oriented, probably about casting expensive stuff, and so he has a little wiggle room to play with his life total.
So Kovac with no land and no spell yet, so 2 Pilgrims are going to come across again here. We'll see if anything's changed here for Kovac. If he wants to make a move, he's going to go down to 10, it looks like right now. We'll see if he's going to want to cast one of these spells, because again, he does need to convert some of these resources, use some of these cards, and get them out of his hand, because he does not want to end the game with multiple cards in his hand that he did not have the opportunity to cast.
Yeah, a lot of blue, white, red Flashes strengthens its efficiency. You want to be deploying your spells basically as efficiently as possible, and so he can afford to take a couple more of these hits, but he probably doesn't want to be sitting there saying go while he's missing land drops and sitting on a handful of reactive spells for very much longer.
So Farseek here from Eilers is going to resolve. Of course, Kovac not going to fight over that. Eilers can have as much mana as he would like at this point, just trying to dodge large threats is Kovacs, as there's a Warriors Helix going to take down an Avacyn's Pilgrim, going to gain Kovacs 4 life back and undo some of the work that was done there by Eilers. You see a Think Twice drawn here for Kovacs' draw step.
Not going to try to think twice for the 5th land, just going to pass the turn back.
Yeah, I think that's perfectly reasonable play. That's 1 damage here from the Pilgrim's going to knock Kovacs down to 13, but no real reason for Kovacs to panic or move yet. You see, now he's going to cast Think Twice and does draw an island. Going to untap, going to draw another card here, so it's Suffer Fall. So now the next 2 land drops are taken care of. So you're feeling pretty good right now if you're Chase Kovacs. Yeah,
and you have Turn Burn now fused as a potential answer to pretty much any big guide that Mark can generate here. And you're getting the breathing space to resolve a Revelation.
Bonfire of the Damned going to be miracled here from Eilers. Normally a backbreaking play, but not the end of the world. Just a large fireball here from Eilers is what Bonfire is going to do. But you see Snapcaster Mage, you see a Syncopate, it's going to be for 2. If it would be for 1, Eilers could pay via Avacyn's Pilgrim. So Bonfire is handled this go around via Syncopate. And Eilers just going to pass the turn back here. So Kovacs doing a really nice job of turning the corner now. Snapcaster Mage actually coming into attack as well. And now because he's hit his 6th land, now it could be Sphinx's Revelation time.
Yep. Again, he still has those turn burns back as insurance against any large haster that Mark draws here. If Mark does nothing again with his turn, then you can rep to 3.
So you see 3 mana. We see a Boros Reckoner. They put on a stack. That's going to resolve. And again, as you mentioned, Turn Burn going to be able to do a nice job of taking care of that card as well. Turn Burn actually just phenomenal against any large threats that people are trying to do. And this Naya deck is a little bit of a bigger Naya deck. Turn Burn lines up really well against this deck.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you'd be happy to pay 5 mana for Terminate in a lot of spots against this sort of deck. It gives Blue White Red Flash a nice clean answer to Thragtusk, which it was kind of lacking before. And actually, both the individual modes of the spell are also reasonably efficient in various spots. So it's just a great addition to the deck.
So here's a Gorkland Rampager from Eilers that is going to resolve, but Kovacs is going to draw 4 and gain 4. And Revelation may be putting this game out of reach rather quickly, as he's going to quickly untap his cards, draw. Looks like he's drawn some lands, make sure he can hit his land drops, and another Revelation. So what we've oftentimes seen with Blue White Red is you have a little baby Revelation for 3, next one might be for 5 or 6, and then the one after that, there's no coming back from.
Yep. The first one is often to undo your opponent's work and set up the second one.
Yep.
And Chase with a plethora of options. Again, Turn Burn still at the ready for anything. He's going to sit back and hang back on D for a turn. No real rush to act.
You see an attack here from Eilers because he simply doesn't have a choice. Holding back's not going to do anything. He's just going to have to play his creatures whenever he draws them and just keep turning them sideways. Hopefully for Eilers, Kovacs doesn't have something like a Supreme Verdict, Warriors Helix, really anything, kind of hoping that he misses Sphinx's Revelation. But if you're Eilers, you can't feel very confident in the situation that you're in right now. Your opponent has so much life, has so many lands in play, and so many cards in hand. It's definitely an uphill battle right now.
Yep.
You see a Restoration Angel here, going to blink out Snapcaster Mage. You see Kovacs going to be reaching for his graveyard. Might be time for another Warleader's Helix, and it looks like it is. So 4 more life and taking care of that large Gorkland Rampager on Eilers' end step. But Eilers is going to take the opportunity to resolve an Advent of the Worm while Kovacs shields are down. So now a 5/5 is in play. But again, Kovacs probably has the necessary answers to be able to deal with that card at this point in time.
Yeah, I mean, it's got Turn Burn, a huge Revelation, and fly over it. Not at its most threatening here.
You can see that Kovacs feels pretty confident where this game is going because he's attacking here with both Snapcaster Mage and a Restoration Angel. Snapcaster Mage turning sideways because of turn from Turn and Burn, being able to make that Advent Worm an 0-1 at a moment's notice. Eilers opting not to block, probably aware that that is a possible play. And thinking that I need to be able to do something with Advent Worm, but rather be attacking with it than trying to block with it.
Yep. I mean, Eilers is sort of rocking a hard place here. If Turn Burn is in the hand, then it's very challenging for him to win. Kessig Wolf Run, not one of Eilers' worst draws in the deck, but the damage might have already been done here.
Yeah, I'm inclined to agree with you. Where Kessig Wolf Run, in a lot of situations, as we saw a little bit earlier with Reed Duke against Brad Nelson, a fantastic card to draw off the top of the deck when you have a ton of lands. But right now, it's difficult for Eilers to be able to make a move with it because he's committing his entire turn to putting all of his mana into it, and anything can go wrong in that situation. One thing we did see here this turn is that he played Kessig Wolfram immediately, attacked with all of his creatures. Kovacs had no block, and we saw no pump from Eilers either, so just taking the damage and pushing himself down to 6 is a little bit surprising. As you see a Sphinx's Revelation here for only 2.
Yeah, that play from Eilers represents that he's sandbagging some sort of trick here. We know his hand is just lands, but Chase's attack on the previous turn so strongly represents turn burn that Eilers kind of has to play along with what's happening here. He has to assume the turn burn's in the hand, and the only way that he can get Chase to potentially mess up is by pumping the brakes, leaving all of his mana untapped and saying, I have a trick here, so be careful about trying to move all in. But Mark just concedes to the Helix to the face, and we go on to a second game.
So Chase Kovac is going to be up a game here over Mark Eilers. Blue Red Flash up 1 over Naya Agros. We will take a look at the sideboards here. We'll go over Eilers first because he is going to be on the play for the second game. You see 3 copies of Unflinching Courage, 2 copies of Blasphemous Act, 2 Garruk Relentless, 1 Assemble the Legion, 1 Fog, 1 Ground Seal, and then 4 cards that look really great in this matchup. 2 Rurik, Thar the Unbowed, and then 2 copies of Boros Charm. I think those 4 cards are very, very easy inclusions. You know, you can argue if Garruk Relentless should show up here. The same can be said for Assemble the Legion because it is a little bit slower, even though Eilers can accelerate to it. But I would assume that we're going to see Rurik, Thar, and Boros Charm here. Both great spells to have in this matchup.
Yeah, I think Assemble the Legion, the big question is how much do you think Chase is going to be leaning on Supreme Verdict in the games? Yeah. If you think that he's going to sideboard into more of a controlling build, then Assemble Legion can be great. If he's basically going to keep the tempo shell of the deck intact, then Assemble Legion likely too slow in the games. We've seen Chase again. It appears playing the same 75 as Matt Costa. We've gone over his sideboarding before. He has 3 copies of Thundermaw Hellkite available to him, 3 copies of Renounce the Guilds, 3 copies of Dispel, 2 of his static casters, Clone, a Supreme Verdict, a Pillar of Flame, and an Oblivion Ring. To me, the Clone, the Supreme Verdict, and the Oblivion Ring are no questions asked. Mark Eilers is playing fundamentally a creature deck. He has numerous excellent targets for Clone, and Oblivion Ring is a great answer to a lot of his threats, and another sweeper would be valuable as well. 3 copies of Thundermaw Hellkite. We've seen Matt Costa lean very heavily on this card the entire weekend, but primarily against control decks. It'll be interesting to see. I'm not sure if this is the matchup where he necessarily wants it. Mark Eilers' deck is not particularly good at locking up the ground. That's the spot where you traditionally want Thundermaw Hellkite, so I'm interested to see if this is a card that gets brought in basically in every post-board game to give the deck a little more power in matchups where you assume your opponent's going to be having a little more resistance against you, or if it's more explicitly of an anti-control card. He also has 3 copies of Renounce the Guilds. There is Aurelia, Gore Clan Rampager, and Huntmaster of the Fells, and Boros Reckoner, all reasonable cards to warrant bringing in Renounce the Guilds. So I assume we're going to see that as well.
Yeah, Renounce the Guilds is this kind of interesting card where it's this really clean answer for, I think, particularly Falconwrath Aristocrat. It doesn't hurt that it can also take care of the cards that you listed in Boros Reckoner, Huntmaster of the Fells, Gore Clan Rampager, Aurelia, and heck, if it comes down to it, Voice of Resurgence. But this is a card that I think you're probably going to see Kovac bring in some numbers. It doesn't have to be 3. But I think there will be some numbers then because Eilers' deck and typical Naya decks, and if Kovac is familiar with Sullivan's list here that Eilers is playing, you know there are a ton of multicolored spells in this deck.
Yes. And any 2-mana removal spell, even if it's a little bit on the narrow side, in conjunction with Snapcaster Mage is very valuable. Just the efficiency that provides. There happens to be a ton of just awesome Renounce the Guild targets in Eilers' deck, most notably Aurelia. But to me, the big question mark is what's happening with Thundermaw Hellkite. Is that being brought in every post-board game because you assume the games are just going to be generally going longer, you want to have a little more power in the deck, or is that something that's specifically for control decks? We're about to find out.
So Eilers is going to be on the play here for game number 2. If you are just joining us, Patrick Sullivan, Cedric Phillips here in the booth. StarCityGames.com is bringing you Grand Prix Miami. Join us on Twitter, please. We'd love to hear from you at SCG Live, #GPMIami, as we're watching 2 players here at 10-2 And this is more or less an elimination round for these guys.
Yes.
This is a top 8 contention match here between Chase Kovacs and Mark Eilers to keep their dreams alive and hoisting potentially a Grand Prix trophy. As a far seek here from Eilers again on turn 2 on the play, it's going to get him a stomping ground and let him generate a mana advantage here against Kovacs.
Yep, already 3 mana to 1 here, but Kovacs in this matchup does have a lot of cheap ways to break serve between Renounce the Guilds and Syncopate, so getting out on that front foot is not necessarily going to mean that Eilers is going to have a huge advantage to leverage.
And Syncopate played a huge role in that last game. Really was able to let Kovacs keep his head above water, but he has the shields down right now. It's going to resolve an Augur of Bolas and see what he can find. He's going to consult his hand. That means it's not a miss for once.
Yes.
Yeah, we often see that card put 3 cards to the bottom here on the SCG Live cam, but this is going to be a hit or a really good bluff. One of the two. I'm not quite sure what he's bluffing.
Yeah, the value of the bluff is pretty hard to detect at this point.
Yeah. And Sphinx of the Revelation is going to go to the grip here for Kovacs. So let's see what kind of haymaker Eilers can throw this turn. As a Sacred Foundry, excuse me, is going to come to play on tap. Going to knock Eilers down to 18 to 3 mana. All right, so there's a Boros Reckoner and an Avacyn's Pilgrim. So 2 spells and going to pass the turn back.
Yeah. So Eilers with a ton of mana, it's gonna be interesting to see next turn if he has any sort of follow-up. He risks kind of very similar to the first game, potentially flooding out a little bit here if he doesn't have some big follow-up.
Yeah, it is super important for his spells, for his deck, excuse me, to just keep throwing haymakers. And if he is going to get flooded out, then there needs to be a Kessig Wolf run among those lands to mitigate that mana flood.
Yep. And that pillar is actually a pretty good sign for Eilers. It's very unlikely that he'd be willing to pillar that Avacyn's Pilgrim if he had Supreme Verdict in hand, so Mark can probably reasonably assume that the coast is clear for his next play.
Now this is interesting because here Eilers did have a 5th land and does have Thundermaw Hellkite in his hand and elected not to play one.
Yeah, that is, for the reasons I just said, that is a little surprising to me. I think that pillar is a strong representation that there's no Supreme Verdict coming anytime in the near future, and that could have been a good spot to land it. And especially now that you know your opponent has access to, there's a Sphinx of the Revelation in hand from one of these Augurs, time is not on your side.
Yeah.
I would have erred on the side of probably being a little bit riskier.
Yeah, I would have, like you're saying, no interest in playing a longer game. Yes, I do have some very good cards in my deck, but a longer game is always going to favor Kovacs because Kovacs cannot play the aggressive game. You can. So as far as role assessment is concerned, you knowing that, hey, I'm the beatdown, I have to be the aggressor in this matchup is very, very important. Because Eilers is going to play a land, and he's going to start his turn off with a Voice of Resurgence, the ultimate test spell against a Blue-Red Flash deck.
Yes.
This will force Kovacs' hand, and force it does with a Restoration Angel. Going to blink an Augur of Bolas. Going to take a look at the top 3 cards. One of those cards is Renounce the Guilds. So that's what's going to go over to Kovacs' hand. See if Boros Reckoner feels like attacking on this turn or not, because he can bluff a Gorkland Rampager. He can also just trade it with a Restoration Angel at this point as well.
Yes. Well, I certainly think sitting back on defense is not likely to guess very, very far, although he does have Thundermaw Hellkite in hand, so he has the potential to tap down that Restoration Angel if it's sitting back on defense.
So Kovacs is going to have to operate in his main phase now. You see an Azorius Charm in his hand, not looking to be the best card at this moment due to Voice of Resurgence. This is going to change the way that he has to play the game. And you see him starting to tap his mana on his own turn and considering his options because he has no interest, or at least Voice of Resurgence will not allow him to play on Eilers' turn.
Yeah. The Blue-White-Red Flash deck has access to Pillar Flame, obviously a very efficient answer to Voice of Resurgence, but in the absence of that card, it's fairly awkward for the Flash deck to play the type of game that it wants to play when Voice of Resurgence is in play.
So after the attack for 3, you see Kovacs really kind of racking his head for his options here. And, this is something that we brought up a little bit earlier watching Matt Costa play this deck. Unfair to compare Matt Costa to anybody here, but you see the difference in kind of the uncertainty here for Kovacs. Kind of unsure what he wants to do on this turn. Do I want to do this on my main phase, take care of that Voice of Resurgence? Now Renounce the Guilds is available, kind of making that Boros Reckoner look a little bit worse. But, that certainty is what leads to a lot of wins with Blue-White-Red Flash.
The land off the top.
We see a lot of mana being tapped here. This looks like a bonfire for 3, and that's exactly what it's going to be. So 3 damage going over to Kovacs. Augur Bolus is clear out of the way, and now, of course, I thought maybe renounce the guilds, but it's going to be an Azorius Charm, putting that Boros Reckoner back on top. How do you feel about that play?
Well, I mean, if he feels he has a big tempo edge here, then he might be just happy with Eilers effectively losing a turn, having to redraw Boros Reckoner.
So now Thundermaw Hellkite shows up to the party. You see Kovacs' hand right now. Eilers going to try to attack. Kovacs going to let it happen. Has a Azorius Charm in his hand too.
Yeah, no, I think Kovacs feels he's far enough ahead of the game that he can kind of ignore that, especially if he's resolving Revelations. He has a Moorland Haunt to start chump blocking the Thundermaw Hellkite if he feels so inclined, and I think he's happy to just try to close out this game in a couple turns.
And it looks like racing is the call for the day. So in comes Restoration Angel. Looks like it's going to knock Eilers down to 6, plays a land and passes the turn back. Now again, we know Eilers does have a Boros Reckoner in his hand. Draws a card for the turn, sends with the dragon to start. And we see Kovacs reaching. Moorland Haunt, a card you pointed out, is going to be activated here. Going to remove Augur Bolus, put a Spirit Token into play, and be happy to get in front of that Thundermaw Hellkite. Follow-up here is a Boros Reckoner. You see Eilers' hand. Last card he has in his hand looks like a Clifftop Retreat. He's going to play that and pass the turn. Renounce the guilds will take care of the Reckoner. As Kovacs going to untap, draws a Pillar of Flame for the turn, serves with the Angel yet again to put Eilers down to 3.
He has lands, a Pillar of Flame, and an Azorius Charm, so
not the best hand.
It should be enough to, I would assume it's enough to seal the deal here.
If you have any Township to draw. Now Kovacs is going to use Moorland Haunt yet again. Make a 1/1 token. He's going to draw. He finds a Sacred Foundry, plays an island, and oddly enough, he can serve with both of these creatures. Deal the 1, cast a Pillar of Flame, and that's going to be enough for the victory. Chase Kovacs is going to win this match 2-0 over Mark Eilers, keeping his top 8 dreams alive. Blue-White-Red Flash over Naya Aggro, a deck that you said coming in this tournament you would have liked to play.
Yeah, and I think